I never expected to see him again, not like this. Walking through the front door of the open house, my heels clicking on the polished hardwood floor, I felt a chill race down my spine. The air inside was cool and crisp, tinged with that faint scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. Yet the familiarity of it all was suffocating. This had been my home. Our home. I tightened my grip on Brian's arm, drawing strength from his solid presence beside me. He glanced down with that comforting smile, the one that always reminded me I made the right choice, leaving the past behind for something better, something more fitting of who I'd become. I scanned the room, my eyes taking in every detail. The walls were a neutral shade now, nothing like the warm amber Jake and I had spent a weekend painting, laughing as we smeared paint on each other's noses. The thought flashed by, uninvited and unwanted. I shook it off, letting my gaze fall on the sleek furniture, the strategically placed plants, the carefully staged perfection meant to sell a dream. Then I saw him. Jake stood by the kitchen island, arms casually crossed, his posture relaxed but commanding. He looked good. Better than I remembered. His dark hair was shorter, neatly styled, and he wore a tailored navy blazer that complemented his broad shoulders. I could tell he'd been working out, his frame more muscular than before. That was new. I swallowed, annoyed at the way my pulse quickened. Brian's fingers squeezed my shoulder. "This is nice," he commented, oblivious to the tension knotting inside me. "Good neighborhood. Think they take our offer?" I forced a smile, masking the turmoil beneath. "Maybe? Let's take a look around first." I needed to walk through this house, see for myself how much of me still lingered within its walls. Jake's eyes met mine as we approached. There was no surprise there, no shock. Just a cool, detached gaze that made my chest tighten. I'd brace for anger, maybe even bitterness, but his indifference was somehow worse. "Claire," he greeted, his voice even, polite. He didn't even look at Brian. I arched an eyebrow, refusing to let him see the unease bubbling beneath my calm exterior. "Jake," I replied, my tone light, almost playful. "Didn't think you'd still be here." He leaned back, his posture unbothered, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Just waiting for the right buyer." His eyes flicked to Brian then, lingering for a moment before returning to me. "I see you moved on quickly." There was no accusation in his words, but they stung all the same. I lifted my chin, my defenses hardening. Some of us don't need to wallow in the past to find happiness. Jake's expression didn't change, but something in his gaze sharpened. "No, I guess not," he agreed, his tone maddeningly calm. "Some of us find it by running away." My breath caught. I opened my mouth, ready to retaliate, but Brian cut in smoothly, his arm tightening around my waist. "Nice place," he said, his voice filled with casual indifference. "Thought you'd have moved on to better things, Jake." Jake's eyes flicked to Brian again, a flash of something dark crossing his face before he shrugged. "Oh, I did," he said, his voice low and confident. "Selling this place is just the last piece of unfinished business." The words hit harder than they should have. I wanted to laugh, to brush off his bravado, but my throat felt tight. I turned away, pretending to examine the stainless steel appliances, anything to avoid meeting his gaze. I could feel his eyes on me, cool and detached, like he was assessing the damage and finding nothing worth salvaging. I forced myself to walk through the house, room by room, Brian's hand on my back a constant reminder of my new life, my better life. Yet each step felt like walking through a memory, lazy Sunday mornings in the kitchen, movie nights tangled on the couch, whispered promises in the dark. They hung heavy in the air, ghosts of a life I'd left behind. We made our way to the master bedroom, the space that had once been ours. The bed was new, the linens crisp and impersonal, but the view from the window was unchanged. I stared at the familiar tree in the backyard, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. How many mornings had I stood here, sipping coffee, wrapped in Jake's arms, watching the world wake up? My chest tightened. I wanted to hate this place, to see it as just another house, another investment. But it was more than that. It was the life I'd walked away from. Brian's voice pulled me back. "We could make this our own," he said, his fingers brushing my shoulder. "Redecorate. Make it better." Better. The word echoed in my mind, hollow and taunting. Hadn't that been my reason for leaving? I wanted better. I deserved better. I forced a smile, leaning into his touch. "Yes, we could." But as the words left my lips, they felt insincere, empty. Turning away from the window, I glanced at the doorway and felt my heart lurch. Jake stood there, leaning casually against the frame, his arms crossed as he watched us. His face was calm, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were piercing, seeing through my facade with infuriating clarity. I lifted my chin, refusing to be rattled. "Well, it was good seeing you again, Jake." I'm sure you'll have no trouble selling this place, eventually. Jake's lips curved into a smile, but his eyes remained cold. Oh, I'm not worried about that. His gaze flicked to Brian. After all, the past has a way of catching up, when you least expect it. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to laugh, brushing off his words. We'll see about that. I took Brian's hand, pulling him toward the stairs. Let's go. We have better things to do. But as we walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's eyes were still on me, watching, waiting, knowing more than he was letting on. And for the first time since I walked out on him, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. I should have felt victorious. Walking out of that open house with Brian by my side, I had expected the satisfying rush of triumph, the final nail in the coffin of my past with Jake. I had imagined his expression crumbling under the weight of my presence, my new life paraded in front of him like a prize he could never have again. But instead, there was something else lingering beneath my skin, something I didn't want to name. His eyes. They had followed me the entire time, calm, assessing, unshaken. He hadn't looked heartbroken or bitter, not even resentful. If anything, he had looked amused. Like he knew something I didn't. I hated that. Brian tightened his grip on my hand as we walked toward the car. Well, that was interesting, he muttered, pulling his sunglasses from his pocket and sliding them on. He was trying to sound casual, but I could hear the edge in his voice. I smiled, leaning into him. Jealous. I teased, hoping to smooth over whatever tension had settled between us. Brian let out a short laugh. Of your ex? He shook his head, unlocking the car. Hardly. I just don't like the way he looked at you. I rolled my eyes. Oh, come on. He was shocked to see me. He was just trying to play it cool. Brian didn't answer right away. He opened the driver's side door but didn't get in, his jaw tightening slightly. I don't think so, he finally said. He didn't look shocked at all. More like, entertained. I scoffed, but the remark hit deeper than I wanted to admit. I slid into the passenger seat, pulling my seatbelt across my chest. Brian's mood had shifted and I didn't like it. He's probably just trying to get in my head, I said lightly, brushing imaginary lint off my skirt. It's pathetic, really. We should be flattered, he's obviously still obsessed with me. Brian chuckled dryly as he started the car. Right. And yet, he's the one selling his house and moving on while we're the ones walking through it. I pursed my lips. That was the problem with Brian, he wasn't like Jake. Jake had never questioned me, never challenged me. Brian, on the other hand, had a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue when it came to dissecting situations. Well, I said, forcing a smirk, maybe we should buy it. Give him a little reminder that I've moved on to better things. Brian turned to look at me then, his expression unreadable behind his sunglasses. For a moment, I thought he was considering it. Then he shook his head with a smirk. Nah. We don't live in the past, remember? I laughed, but it felt hollow. As we pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the side mirror, catching one last glimpse of Jake standing at the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching us leave. That same, knowing smirk still on his lips. The unease stayed with me the rest of the day, lingering like perfume that refused to fade. Brian and I went to dinner that night, a trendy new steakhouse downtown with candlelit tables and an expensive wine list. We should have been celebrating, toasting to our success and our future. But instead, my mind kept wandering back to Jake, to that house, to the unshakable feeling that I had walked into a trap I hadn't even seen coming. You're distracted, Brian noted, sipping his whiskey. I blinked, snapping back to the present. No, I'm just thinking. He tilted his head, waiting. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. It's just weird, you know? Being back in that house. Seeing him again. I played with the stem of my wine glass, my voice casual. I guess I expected him to be more broken. Brian raised an eyebrow. It's been what? 2 years. Almost 3, I corrected before I could stop myself. Brian smirked. Right. And you expected him to be what? Living in squalor? Crying himself to sleep. I shrugged, suddenly irritated by his tone. I don't know, Brian. It just caught me off guard. That's all. He watched me for a moment, then set his glass down. I don't care about him, Claire. But I do care about the fact that you haven't stopped talking about him since we left. I opened my mouth, but he wasn't wrong. I had spent the entire drive home replaying the conversation in my head, dissecting every glance, every smirk, every carefully placed word Jake had said. Even now at this table, surrounded by the hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware, I was still caught in his orbit. Brian sighed, leaning forward. Look, I get it. Seeing an ex can be unsettling. But don't let him get in your head. He smirked. Unless that's where you want him. I frowned, hating the implication. That's ridiculous. Is it? Brian tilted his glass toward me. Because from where I'm sitting you look like someone who didn't get the reaction they wanted. I stared at him, the irritation bubbling beneath my skin. I hated that he could read me so well. Fine, I said, taking a long sip of my wine. I'll drop it. Brian nodded approvingly. But that was a lie. I wasn't going to drop it. Because the more I thought about it, the more something felt off about Jake's reaction. He should have been furious, bitter, resentful. Something. But instead, he had been too calm, too composed. And that smile. That damn smirk. It wasn't the look of a man who had lost. It was the look of a man who knew something I didn't. And that thought was far more dangerous than anything I had planned for him. I told myself I'd forget about Jake. That was the plan. I had spent nearly 3 years erasing him from my life, from my thoughts. I had moved on, found someone better, built something new. So why did that damn smirk of his keep flashing through my mind, like a warning I couldn't quite decipher? It was late when Brian and I got home from dinner. The city skyline shimmered outside our condo windows, the soft hum of traffic below a distant lullaby. Brian disappeared into the bedroom, stripping off his jacket, already moving on from the day. But I stood in the kitchen, pouring myself another glass of wine, staring blankly at my phone. Against my better judgment, I typed Jake's name into the search bar. I hesitated before pressing enter. What was I looking for? Proof that he was struggling? Confirmation that I had won? The results loaded instantly. Jake Sullivan. Real estate investor. Former engineer. No scandals, no financial disasters, no sign of a man struggling to pick up the pieces of a life I had left shattered. Instead, I found something worse. A picture. It was from last month, taken at some high-profile charity event. He was standing next to a woman, a stunning brunette in an emerald green dress that fit her like a second skin. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, their smiles perfectly in sync. My stomach twisted. I clicked on her name. Natalie Pierce. The name was vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place it. A corporate attorney. Highly successful. Beautiful. I swallowed hard. Why did this bother me? I had Brian. I had everything I wanted. Jake was supposed to be miserable. Alone. Drowning in regret. Instead, he looked like he had upgraded. A slow burn of irritation coiled in my chest. I shut my phone off and downed the rest of my wine. This was stupid. He didn't matter anymore. So why did it feel like I was the one who had lost? The next morning, Brian left early for work, kissing my cheek absently before heading out the door. He had some meetings with clients, leaving me with an entire day free. And far too much time to think. I spent most of the morning pretending to work, answering emails, reviewing event plans, but my focus was non-existent. Every few minutes I'd find myself reaching for my phone, scrolling aimlessly, trying not to think about Jake. Then my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Hope you enjoyed the open house. Maybe next time you'll stop pretending you don't care. My blood went cold. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. Jake. I hadn't heard from him since the divorce was finalized. No texts, no emails. Nothing. I had expected him to disappear, to nurse his wounds in silence. But now he was reaching out? I stared at the message, debating how to respond. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, 1,000 snarky replies forming in my mind. I wanted to act like it didn't faze me, that I hadn't thought about him once since walking out of that house. But I hesitated too long. Another message popped up. Unknown number, lost for words? That's new. I clenched my jaw. He was baiting me. Fine. I'd bite. Me, cute. Didn't realize you were keeping tabs on me. I watched the 3 little dots appear, then disappear. He was thinking. Then. Jake. Just hard to miss when someone walks back into your life acting like they still have something to prove. A rush of irritation flared in my chest. Me, you think I have something to prove? You're the one texting me. A pause. Then. Jake, fair point. But you didn't have to come to the house. So what is it, Claire? Curiosity? Or regret? My stomach tightened. Me, don't flatter yourself. It was Brian's idea. We're looking for an investment. Jake, right? And I'm sure it was just a coincidence you walked through our bedroom and stared out that window like you missed waking up there. I gritted my teeth. How dare he? Me, you really think I'd miss you? The reply came instantly. Jake, no. But I think you miss the way I used to look at you. And you hate that someone else gets that now. My grip on the phone tightened, my pulse hammering in my ears. I could picture him smirking as he typed, knowing exactly what buttons to push. I forced myself to take a deep breath. He was messing with me, trying to get in my head. I wouldn't let him. I deleted the conversation, blocked the number, tossed my phone onto the couch. This was exactly what he wanted. He wanted me rattled. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction, but it was too late. 'Cause now he was in my head. Now I was remembering the way he used to look at me. And now I was thinking about something I never should have. What if leaving him hadn't been my greatest victory? What if it had been my biggest mistake? I couldn't get him out of my head. Days passed, but Jake's words clung to me, seeping into my thoughts like ink bleeding through paper. I went through the motions of my life, smiling at Brian, attending client meetings, making dinner reservations, but the truth was I was distracted, restless. The worst part? I didn't even know why. It wasn't like I wanted Jake back. I had Brian now. Brian, who was wealthier, more ambitious, more exciting than Jake ever was. I had traded up. I had everything I wanted. So why did it feel like I had lost? I needed to clear my head. On Saturday morning I told Brian I was going shopping, kissed his cheek and left the condo. But I didn't head downtown. Instead I drove across the city, winding through familiar streets until I found myself on a road I hadn't driven down in nearly 3 years. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. The trees were taller, the sidewalks newly paved, but the houses stood as they always had, picturesque and perfect. I slowed the car as I approached, my heart tightening as Jake's house came into view. Our house. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. It felt smaller now, more modest. The porch swing still hung on the front porch, swaying gently in the breeze. I could almost see us there, laughing, tangled together under a blanket. Our lives ahead of us, full of possibility. I swallowed the lump in my throat. That was a lifetime ago. A different version of me. I was about to drive away when I saw her. A woman emerged from the house, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, sunglasses perched on her head. She was beautiful, tall and poised, her figure flawless in tailored jeans and a white blouse. She carried a stack of boxes, her movements graceful as she loaded them into the trunk of her car. I didn't need an introduction to know who she was. Natalie Pierce. The woman from the photo. I watched, my chest tightening as she moved comfortably around the driveway, like she belonged there, like she was home. I shouldn't have been surprised. Jake was always a good catch, steady, dependable, loyal to a fault. I had known he wouldn't stay single forever. I had just expected. I don't know what I had expected, but it hadn't been this. Natalie shut the trunk and turned, her eyes flicking up the street as she wiped her hands on her jeans. Her gaze landed on my car, and for a brief moment I panicked. Would she recognize me? Did Jake tell her about me? But she didn't react. She just turned and went back inside, the door closing softly behind her. I released the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had seen enough. I drove away, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. He had moved on. Really moved on. Not just dating, not just some rebound. This was serious. This was home. When I got back to the condo, Brian was in his office typing away at his laptop. He glanced up as I walked in. Buy anything good? I forced a smile. Just a few things. Nothing special. He nodded, his attention already drifting back to his work. Good. I'm glad you're keeping busy. I'll be tied up most of the afternoon with these reports. I stood there watching him. He was everything I thought I wanted: successful, charming, powerful. He had shown me a life I never dreamed of: vacations in Italy, dinners at 5-star restaurants, a wardrobe full of designer clothes. But looking at him now, all I felt was distance. I tried to push the thought away, tried to remind myself of everything I had gained. But I couldn't shake the image of Natalie, her ease and confidence, the way she moved around my house like she had always belonged there. Did Jake look at her the way he used to look at me? Did he hold her the way he used to hold me? Did she get his late-night phone calls, his sleepy good mornings, his soft whispers in the dark? The jealousy that surged through me was sharp and bitter, catching me off guard. I hadn't wanted him. I had walked away. I had chosen a different life. So why did it feel like she had stolen something from me? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning, my thoughts tangled and restless. I dreamed of Jake, of us laughing in the kitchen, of the way his arms felt around me, of the way he used to kiss me, slow and tender, like I was his whole world. I woke up angry. Angry at myself for caring. Angry at him for moving on. I was in the kitchen making coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from Brian. But it wasn't from him. It was from an unknown number. My heart stuttered. I picked up the phone, my fingers trembling as I opened the message. Unknown number, I saw you today. If you wanted to talk, you should have come to the door. My chest tightened. How? I realized then. Natalie must have told him. She must have seen me and mentioned it, probably laughing at the pathetic ex-wife spying on them from the street. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment. Then another message came through. Unknown number, I hope you got the answers you were looking for. But something tells me you didn't. My throat tightened. Unknown number, funny how you walked away, but now you're the one who can't let go. I stared at the screen, my face burning. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to tell him he was wrong. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down I knew he was right. I hated him. Hated the way he was getting under my skin, twisting my emotions until I didn't even recognize myself. I was supposed to be happy. I was happy. I had Brian, I had everything I wanted. So why did I feel like I was losing a game I didn't even know I was playing? Jake's last message was a taunt, echoing in my mind on a loop. Funny how you walked away, but now you're the one who can't let go. I clenched my jaw, tossing my phone onto the bed. Who the hell did he think he was? He didn't get to judge me. He didn't get to act like he was better than me. Not when I was the one who walked out. Not when I was the one who won. But even as I thought it, the words felt hollow. I wanted to block his number. I wanted to delete the messages and erase him from my mind. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because somewhere deep inside, a part of me was still waiting. Waiting for the next message. Waiting for the next chance to prove that I had moved on, that I was over him. But the message didn't come. 3 days went by. 3 long, agonizing days of silence. I kept checking my phone, my heart skipping every time it buzzed, only to feel the crushing disappointment when it was just a notification or an email. By the 4th day, I was ready to explode. Fine. If he wanted to play games, I could play too. I knew exactly how to get his attention. The plan. It was simple, really. I just needed to remind him what he lost. Show him that he didn't matter, that he was just a forgotten chapter in my story. So I posted a photo. It was from a weekend getaway Brian and I took to Napa Valley a few months ago. We were standing on a balcony, the vineyard stretching out behind us, the golden sunset painting the sky. Brian's arms were wrapped around my waist, his lips brushing my cheek as I laughed, my head tilted back in perfect happiness. I stared at the picture for a long moment before hitting post. Then I waited. The likes poured in instantly. Friends, colleagues, even people I barely knew. They all saw the perfect life I had built, the beautiful love story I was living. I watched the number climb, the comments flooding in. You two are so cute. Couple goals. You look so happy. But none of it mattered. Not unless he saw it too. I refreshed the screen, checking the views. The anticipation was maddening, my heart pounding as I waited, watching for his name to appear. Then finally it did. Jake Sullivan viewed your story. A rush of satisfaction flooded through me. I could imagine him now staring at the screen, realizing that I had moved on to better things, that he was nothing more than a distant memory. That would teach him. I expected another text, another snarky remark. But it didn't come. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even the day after that. Instead, he did something worse. I was scrolling through my feed when I saw it. A picture of Jake and Natalie, smiling together at some fancy gala, his arm wrapped around her waist. They looked flawless, like they were pulled from the pages of a magazine. Natalie wore a red dress that hugged her curves, her hair cascading in perfect waves. And Jake, he looked happy. Genuinely happy. But it was the caption that made my chest tighten. Luckiest man in the world. I gripped my phone, my vision blurring as I stared at the screen. He was taunting me. He had to be. There was no other reason he would post that picture. Not when he knew I was watching. Not when he knew exactly how to get under my skin. He was doing this on purpose. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just trying to move on. He was trying to win. I tried to shake it off, tried to pretend it didn't matter. But the image was burned into my mind, haunting me every time I closed my eyes. I couldn't focus at work. I snapped at Brian, picking fights over the smallest things. He noticed, of course. How could he not? But he just shrugged it off, blaming stress or hormones or whatever excuse he could come up with to avoid dealing with the truth. But the truth was I was unraveling. I hated the power Jake had over me. Hated that he could still make me feel this way after everything. After I had walked away. After I had built a better life. But I couldn't stop. I checked his profile again. And again. He didn't post much, never did. But I combed through every picture, every tagged post, every scrap of information I could find. I scrolled through his followers, his friends, his comments, looking for clues, I didn't even know what I was looking for. All I knew was that it felt like he was winning. And I couldn't let that happen. It was late when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, too tired and frustrated to deal with another meaningless notification. But then I saw the name. Unknown number. My heart leapt. I opened the message, my breath catching in my throat. Unknown number. You're not the only one who's curious about the past. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. Unknown number. If you want to know the truth, meet me tomorrow. 4 p.m. Green Cafe on Main Street. My mind spun. Was this Jake? Was he finally ready to admit the game he was playing? Was he ready to lose? Or was it someone else? Someone who knew more than I did? Someone who could finally give me the answers I needed? I hesitated, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. Then before I could change my mind, I typed out a single word. Me okay. I hit send. Then I waited. The next day I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I told myself it was nothing. Just a stupid meeting. Just curiosity. It wasn't like I cared. It wasn't like I was obsessing. But as the hours ticked by, I found myself checking my phone, rereading the message, trying to figure out who had sent it. It had to be Jake. Who else would it be? I shook my head. No, I wasn't going to do this. I wasn't going to fall into his little game, let him string me along, let him win. If he wanted to mess with me, I'd play right back. By the time 4 p.m. rolled around, I was already sitting at a small corner table at Green Cafe. My fingers curled around a steaming cup of tea. I had picked a spot near the window where I could see everyone coming and going. And then I saw her. Natalie. My heart stuttered. She was walking toward the cafe, her long legs moving with practiced ease, her sunglasses perched on top of her head. She wore a sleek white blouse, her dark hair tied back in a low ponytail. She looked calm, confident. Not at all like a woman who should be meeting her boyfriend's ex-wife in secret. This was not what I was expecting. I sat frozen as she entered the cafe, her eyes scanning the room before landing on me. For a brief second I thought she might walk past me. But then she strode right up to my table, pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down. I forced myself to stay composed. Didn't peg you for the mysterious text type, I said, lifting my cup to my lips, hiding my nerves behind a casual sip. She didn't smile. I thought it would be the easiest way to get you here. I set my cup down carefully. And why would you want to do that? Natalie tilted her head, studying me. Because I know you've been watching us. A chill ran down my spine. Excuse me. She leaned in slightly. You were outside the house. You checked my profile. You're still keeping tabs on Jake. She raised an eyebrow. I don't mind. I actually think it's kind of funny. My teeth clenched. I don't know what you're talking about. She smirked, and for a second I hated how much she reminded me of him. That same cool, unreadable expression. That same I know something you don't look. Sure, she said lightly. You're completely over him. That's why you showed up at his open house with your new husband, parading him around like a trophy. That's why you've been lurking, waiting for some kind of reaction. She took a sip of her coffee. But here's the thing, Claire. You didn't get one. And it's driving you crazy. Heat crept up my neck. If you called me here just to psychoanalyze me, I have better things to do. Oh, I doubt that, she said smoothly, setting her cup down. I called you here because I thought you'd want to know the truth. My stomach twisted. About what? Her lips curved into a slow smile. About why Jake never really fell apart after you left. I swallowed. He did fall apart. She let out a soft laugh. Is that what you told yourself? That he spent years pining after you, broken and alone? She shook her head. Sweetheart, Jake wasn't the one suffering. I gritted my teeth. He still lived in our house. Sure, she shrugged. Until it was financially smart to sell. Until he was ready. Not because he was stuck in the past. She leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. You know what's funny? You walked out of his life thinking you had the upper hand. That he'd crumble. That you won. But Jake didn't waste time mourning you, Claire. He moved forward. He upgraded. The words stung more than they should have. I scoffed. So this is what this is about? You marking your territory. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Congrats. You have him now. Gold star. Natalie laughed softly, shaking her head. I'm not here to mark territory. I know exactly where I stand in Jake's life. She tilted her head. Do you? Something sharp twisted inside me. I forced a smirk. You don't intimidate me. I don't need to, she said easily. You've already lost. I swallowed the bitter taste rising in my throat. I needed to get out of here. I needed to walk away before she saw the cracks forming in my composure. I reached for my bag, but then she spoke again, stopping me cold. I used to wonder why he never talked about you, she mused, stirring her coffee lazily. When we started dating, I thought maybe he was just being polite, that he didn't want to badmouth an ex. But then I realized something. I swallowed hard. And what's that? Natalie smiled. You never really mattered as much as you thought you did. A flash of white-hot rage surged through me. Go to hell. She shrugged, unfazed. Truth hurts, doesn't it? I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Enjoy your perfect little life, Natalie. We'll see how long it lasts. She chuckled, shaking her head. Oh, Claire. It's not me you're mad at. It's him. I stormed out of the cafe, my heart slamming against my ribs. I told myself I was fine. That she was just trying to get under my skin. That I didn't care. But as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, one terrifying thought echoed in my mind. What if she was right? I couldn't breathe. The drive home was a blur. The streets melting together as Natalie's words replayed in my mind. You never really mattered as much as you thought you did. She was lying. She had to be. Jake loved me. He worshipped me. I was his world. I was the one who left him. I was the one who moved on. But as I pulled into the parking garage, the knot in my chest tightened. I had never imagined him truly letting go. I had pictured him waiting alone, regretting every mistake, every argument, every fight that led me to walk out the door. I had always been in control. Until now. I marched into the condo, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Brian was on the couch, his laptop open, his phone pressed to his ear. He glanced up as I walked in, giving me a brief nod before returning to his conversation. I stormed past him, my hands shaking as I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter. I needed a drink. Something to stop the spiraling thoughts, to drown out Natalie's smug voice echoing in my head. I poured myself a generous glass of wine, downing half of it in one go, the bitterness burning my throat. But it didn't help. The rage was still there, boiling beneath my skin, twisting into something uglier, more painful. You never really mattered. I wanted to scream, to shatter something, to make Jake feel just as shattered as I did. But instead, I grabbed my phone. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just hit call, the line ringing before I could stop myself. It went to voicemail. I hung up, my chest heaving. I stared at his name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button. I could almost see him, that arrogant smirk on his face, knowing he had me right where he wanted me. I hit call again. This time he picked up. Claire. Jake's voice was smooth, steady, and infuriatingly calm. Didn't expect to hear from you. My mouth went dry. I just met with your girlfriend. A beat of silence. Then, did you? I gripped the counter, my knuckles turning white. You think you're clever, don't you? Sending her to play mind games with me. Jake let out a low laugh, and the sound made my skin prickle. Natalie doesn't need me to fight her battles. If she talked to you, it was her choice. I hated how unbothered he sounded, like he was enjoying every second of this. You knew I went to the house, I snapped. You knew I was there, and you let her ambush me. He was silent for a moment, and then he said, Why were you there, Claire? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Jake continued, his voice taking on an edge I didn't recognize. What were you looking for? I swallowed. Don't flatter yourself. Brian and I were looking for an investment. Oh, right. The perfect investment property, he mocked. Funny how it just happened to be our house. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. Don't read into it. Don't worry. I don't, he shot back. But Natalie's curious. She seems to think you're still hung up on me. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You wish. Do I? His tone was calm, detached. Because from where I'm standing, you're the one making the phone call. You're the one showing up at my house. You're the one who can't seem to let go. My hand trembled. You don't know anything. I know that you walked out, he said, his voice hardening. You left me. And now you're the one looking back. I felt the air leave my lungs. Don't you dare act like you're the victim. I'm not, he replied simply. I'm just the guy who moved on. You're the one who can't stand it. My vision blurred, a lump forming in my throat. You're pathetic. He laughed again, the sound low and cold. Keep telling yourself that, Claire. Whatever helps you sleep at night. I wanted to scream, to throw his words back in his face. But the ache in my chest was too raw, too real. I heard him sigh on the other end of the line. Why did you really call, Claire? I swallowed hard. I wanted to tell you to stay out of my life. You and your girlfriend. Then stop trying to get back into mine. He shot back. You wanted to leave. So stay gone. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood there staring at my phone, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. He had hung up on me. Jake Sullivan had just hung up on me. I sank to the floor. My back pressed against the kitchen cabinets, my phone slipping from my fingers. He had sounded so indifferent. So done. I wanted to believe it was an act, that he was pretending, that he was just trying to get under my skin. But deep down I knew the truth. He meant every word. He had moved on. And I was the one stuck. The tears came without warning, hot and furious, spilling down my cheeks as I choked on a sob. I covered my mouth, trying to stifle the sound, trying to keep it together. But it was no use. I had walked away. I had ended it. I was supposed to be the one who was happy. I was supposed to be the one who won. So why did it feel like I had lost everything? Why did it feel like I was the one left behind? I heard footsteps and then Brian's voice. Claire? What's wrong? I looked up, blinking through the tears, my heart sinking as I saw the worry in his eyes. He reached out to touch my shoulder, but I flinched, my body recoiling instinctively. His hand dropped, his face hardening. What's going on? I shook my head, scrambling to my feet. Nothing. I'm fine. Brian's jaw tightened. Fine? You're crying on the kitchen floor, Claire. That doesn't look fine to me. I wiped my face, forcing a smile. I just had a rough day. That's all. His eyes narrowed. This is about him, isn't it? I went still. What? He crossed his arms, his expression guarded. This is about Jake. I opened my mouth to deny it, to lie, but the words wouldn't come. As he was right. It was always about Jake. Brian's eyes bore into me, unblinking and sharp. I wanted to deny it, to laugh off his accusation as absurd. But the truth was tangled in my throat, too heavy to swallow. I forced a shaky smile, tucking my hair behind my ear. You're being ridiculous, Brian. Why would this have anything to do with Jake? He didn't smile back. His face was hard, his jaw clenched. I don't know. You tell me. My heart thudded painfully against my ribcage. I'm just stressed, okay? Work's been crazy and… Don't lie to me, Claire. He cut me off, his voice low and controlled. I saw you crying. I heard you on the phone. Panic flared in my chest. You were eavesdropping? His eyes narrowed. I was worried about my wife. And now I'm wondering if I should have been worried about something else. I forced out a bitter laugh, crossing my arms defensively. Don't be dramatic. You're making this into something it's not. Brian took a step closer, his shoulders tense. I know you went to his house. My stomach dropped. What? He folded his arms, his expression darkening. You think I don't notice when you start acting weird? You've been distant ever since we went to that open house. And now I find you here, falling apart over some phone call. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. Are you still hung up on him? I felt a surge of anger, hot and defensive. How dare you? Answer the question. I opened my mouth, ready to fire back, to lie, to deflect, to do anything but admit the truth. But the look on his face, the hurt, the suspicion stopped me cold. I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him that Jake was still in my head, that he was haunting me, that I was unraveling because I couldn't stand the thought of him being happy without me. I couldn't tell him because that would mean admitting that my perfect new life wasn't enough. That he wasn't enough. I took a breath, steadying myself. I'm not hung up on him, I said slowly, carefully. I went to his house because I wanted closure. I wanted to see that he was still stuck in the past, still miserable. But he's not. He's moved on. And that surprised me. That's all. Brian's shoulders relaxed, his eyes softening just a fraction. That's all. I nodded, holding his gaze. That's all. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I kept my face calm, composed. I couldn't let him see the cracks, couldn't let him see how close to the edge I was. He watched me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine, looking for the truth. But then he let out a slow breath, his shoulders sagging. You should have told me. I swallowed the guilt, forcing a sad smile. I didn't want to hurt you. I just needed to see for myself. Brian's face softened, his fingers brushing against my arm. I get it. I do. But Claire, he's your ex for a reason. Don't let him get in your head. I looked away, my throat tightening. Too late. Brian pulled me into a hug, his arms strong and warm around me. I let myself lean into him, feeling his heartbeat against my cheek, steady and reassuring. But as he held me, my mind drifted back to Jake, to his voice on the phone, to the way he said I was the one who couldn't let go. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the thoughts away. I had made my choice. I had walked away. I had everything I wanted. So why did it feel like I was losing everything that mattered? That night, Brian fell asleep easily, his breathing soft and even beside me. But I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. I thought about Natalie's smug face, her words cutting deep. I thought about Jake's cold indifference, the way he sounded so done with me. I turned over, my eyes stinging as I blinked back tears. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to forget him. I wanted to be happy. But I couldn't. My phone was on the nightstand, the screen dark and silent. I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I opened Jake's profile again, scrolling through his pictures, looking for. I didn't even know what I was looking for anymore. Proof that he was hurting? Evidence that he was lying, that he was just pretending to be happy? But all I saw was him and Natalie, smiling, perfect, untouchable. The jealousy was sharp and hot, coiling around my heart, making it hard to breathe. She had him. She had my life. My house. My future. I felt sick. I clicked on her profile, scrolling through her posts, her friends, her flawless life. It was sickening. She was everything I wasn't: poised, elegant, put together. She didn't have to fight for his attention. She didn't have to play games. She just had him. I wanted to scream. My thumb hovered over the message button. I could send her something, some nasty little note to shake her confidence, to let her know that she was living in my shadow. I could remind her that I was there first, that he was mine first. But then what? She would show Jake. They would laugh about it. He would see how desperate I was, how pathetic I had become. No. I couldn't give him that satisfaction. I dropped my phone, burying my face in the pillow, my chest heaving with silent sobs. I had walked away from him. I had chosen this life. I had made my bed. But it felt like I was suffocating under the weight of it. I was trapped. Caught between the life I had built and the life I had lost. Between the husband I had now and the man I had never truly let go. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find my way out. I was losing my mind. Days passed, but the ache didn't fade. If anything, it grew worse, gnawing at me from the inside out. I went through the motions of my life, smiling at Brian, attending meetings, posting carefully curated photos of our perfect life. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling. Jake haunted me. He was everywhere, in my dreams, in my thoughts, in every quiet moment when my defenses were down. I heard his voice, that cold indifference that cut deeper than anger ever could. I saw his face, that maddeningly calm expression as he looked at me like I was a stranger. I checked his profile every day, scrolling through his pictures, searching for clues, looking for cracks. But there were none. Every post, every smile, every stolen moment with Natalie was flawless, untouched, untouchable. I hated him for it. But I couldn't stop. Brian noticed. How could he not? I was distant, distracted, barely present. He tried to be patient, to give me space, but his concern was growing. I could see it in the way his eyes followed me, the way his questions grew more pointed, the way his touch became hesitant, unsure. He was slipping away from me. I should have cared. I should have fought for him, for us. But I couldn't. Not when my heart was still tangled up in the past, aching for something I couldn't admit, even to myself. It all came to a head one night at dinner. We were at a trendy new restaurant downtown, Brian's attempt at reconnecting, at pulling me out of whatever spiral I was trapped in. He smiled across the table, his fingers brushing against mine. "I miss you," he said softly. I forced a smile. "I'm right here." He shook his head, his eyes searching mine. "No, you're not. You've been somewhere else for weeks. What's going on, Claire?" I opened my mouth to lie, to brush him off with some excuse about work stress or hormones, but the words wouldn't come. Because as I looked at him, his perfect hair, his designer suit, his calculated charm, I felt nothing. No spark. No thrill. No fire. Nothing. My heart sank. Brian's face fell, his hand pulling away. "Claire." I looked down at my plate, my chest tightening. "I'm just tired." His jaw clenched, his fingers curling into a fist. "Tired. Right." He took a deep breath, his voice lowering. "Is this about him?" My stomach dropped. "What?" "Don't play dumb," he snapped, his eyes flashing. "You think I don't see what's going on? You're distant. You're distracted. You flinch every time I touch you." He leaned closer, his voice cold. "You're still in love with him, aren't you?" I felt the blood drain from my face. That's not true." His eyes narrowed. "Then why did you call him?" My heart stopped. "How did you?" He pulled his phone from his pocket, his lips twisting into a bitter smile. "I'm not an idiot, Claire. I checked your phone records. You called him. You called him, and you've been a ghost ever since." I stared at him, my chest tightening with panic. "You went through my phone records?" He slammed his fist on the table, the plates rattling. "Don't turn this on me. You're the one who can't let go of her ex-husband." His voice was low, furious. "You walked out on him. You chose me. So why the hell are you still obsessed with him?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Brian's eyes darkened, his voice lowering. "Do you still love him?" The question hung between us, heavy and unforgiving. I should have denied it. I should have laughed it off, told him he was being ridiculous, thrown my arms around him and whispered reassurances until he believed them. But I didn't. Because I couldn't. The truth was a knife twisting inside me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But all I could do was sit there, my mouth dry, my chest heaving. Brian's face fell, his shoulders sagging. "Oh my God," he whispered. "You do." Tears stung my eyes, my vision blurring. "Brian, He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this right now." He tossed his napkin onto the table, his face pale. "I need to clear my head." I reached for him, my fingers brushing against his arm. "Brian, wait." But he pulled away, his eyes cold. "Figure out what you want, Claire. Because I'm done fighting for someone who's still in love with a ghost." And then he walked out, leaving me alone at the table, my heart shattering into a million pieces. I stumbled through the front door, my body numb, my chest aching. The condo was dark, empty, cold. I wanted to cry, to scream, to feel something. But all I felt was hollow. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. How did I get here? How did I ruin everything? I should have let Jake go. I should have deleted his number, blocked his profile, walked away like I had always planned. But I couldn't. My phone buzzed in my purse, the screen glowing in the darkness. I pulled it out, my hands trembling as I opened the message. "Unknown number, you don't look happy. Everything okay at home?" I froze. My heart stopped. How did he know? I looked around the condo, the shadows stretching across the floor, the silence pressing down on me. My fingers shook as I typed a response. "Me, who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Unknown number, someone who knows you better than you think." A chill ran down my spine. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, my blood turning to ice. Because suddenly I had the terrifying feeling that I wasn't alone. I gripped my phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. The message glowed on the screen, stark and taunting. "Unknown number, someone who knows you better than you think." I swallowed hard, my eyes darting around the dimly lit condo. Every shadow felt sinister, every creak of the building like a whisper against my skin. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing down on my chest. I stood abruptly, locking the front door, double-checking the deadbolt. My fingers trembled as I pulled the curtains shut, blocking out the city skyline. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. Nervous? A chill slithered down my spine. Me. Who the hell is this? I stared at the screen, waiting, my breath shallow. The reply came almost instantly. Unknown number. You always loved playing games, Claire. Did you think you were the only one who could win? The air left my lungs. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my mind racing. Was this Jake? Was this some kind of twisted payback? Was he watching me right now? I spun toward the balcony, my stomach tightening. The glass door was locked, but the darkness beyond it suddenly felt menacing. I couldn't see anything, but that didn't mean no one was there. I took a step back, my throat dry. Me, if this is Jake, you're pathetic. A pause. Then, unknown number, Jake? Another message. Unknown number. Oh, sweetheart. You think too small. My blood ran cold. Who the hell was this? I pressed the call button, my hands shaking, my heart hammering. The line rang once, twice, then, click, breathing, slow, steady, right against the receiver. I felt my stomach churn. Who is this? I demanded, my voice shaking. Silence. More breathing. Then finally a voice. Low, amused, familiar. See you soon, Claire. The line went dead and I stood frozen, my phone still clutched in my hand, my breath coming in ragged bursts. I knew that voice. I knew that voice. It wasn't Jake. And that terrified me even more. My hands shook as I scrolled through my contacts, hovering over Brian's name. I needed to tell him. I needed him to come home, to remind me that I wasn't losing my mind, that someone was messing with me. But then I stopped. Brian had walked out. He had left me alone, and I had let him. Calling him now, after everything, after the way I had all but admitted my obsession with Jake, would only make things worse. So I did the only thing I could. I called him. The line rang 3 times before he picked up. Claire. Jake's voice was wary, unreadable. I swallowed, gripping the phone tight. I need to ask you something. Sigh. If this is about... It's not about that. I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. Did you give my number to anyone? Or tell anyone where I live? There was a beat of silence. What? I'm serious, Jake, I pressed. Did you tell anyone? His tone darkened. Who's been calling you? I hesitated. I don't know. But they know me. And they just... I let out a shaky breath. They just said they'll see me soon. Another silence. But this time it wasn't amused. It wasn't indifferent. It was dangerous. Where are you right now? He asked. I swallowed. Home. I'm coming over. I blinked. What? Stay inside. Lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone but me. Jake, Click. The call ended. I stared at my phone, my mind spinning. What the hell was happening? 15 minutes later, a sharp knock sounded at my door. I hesitated for only a second before unlocking it, my heart slamming against my ribs as I pulled it open. Jake stood there, his expression hard, his dark eyes scanning me from head to toe. You look like you've seen a ghost, he murmured. Maybe I have, I whispered. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. He was still the same, broad shoulders, controlled movements, that quiet intensity that always made it impossible to tell what he was thinking. But right now I could tell one thing. He was pissed. I shut the door behind him, crossing my arms. You didn't have to come. He ignored me. Show me the messages. I hesitated but then handed him my phone. He scrolled through the conversation, his jaw tightening. This isn't me, he muttered. I know it's not you, I snapped. That's why I called. He ignored my tone, his fingers tapping the screen. The number's blocked. It could be a burner phone. He turned to me, his eyes sharp. Has this happened before? I shook my head. Not like this. His gaze darkened. But something has happened. I hesitated. I thought I saw someone watching me last week. Outside the condo. And I could have sworn I saw a car following me 2 days ago. But I figured I was just imagining things. Jake muttered a curse under his breath. I don't know who it is, Jake. I admitted, my voice quieter now. But they know things. They know me. He was silent for a moment, then handed me back my phone. You need to take this seriously, Claire. I scoffed. Oh, I am. Not seriously enough, he shot back. Do you have security cameras? A doorman. I flinched. No. Of course you don't, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Jesus, Claire. I bristled. I didn't think I needed security, Jake. Yeah? Well, maybe you do now. Something in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. He wasn't just being controlling. He wasn't just playing protector. He was worried. Jake, I said slowly, my throat dry. Do you think this has something to do with us? His jaw clenched. I don't know. I swallowed. You seemed pretty quick to come over. Like you already had a guess. His eyes flicked to mine, dark and unreadable. If I did, he said quietly, you wouldn't want to hear it. A cold wave of unease crashed over me. I had spent weeks playing games, trying to get inside Jake's head, trying to shake him, trying to win. But suddenly I wasn't sure if this was a game anymore. And if it wasn't. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. Jake's eyes were dark, shadowed with something I hadn't seen before, fear. It was subtle, carefully masked, but it was there, tightening his jaw, hardening his posture. I hugged myself, my skin crawling with unease. If you know something, just say it. He shook his head, his gaze drifting toward the window, the city lights casting a cold glow across his face. I thought I knew who was behind this. But now? I'm not so sure. A chill ran down my spine. What are you talking about? Jake didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, peering out through the curtains, his shoulders tense. I've been getting messages too. Calls. But I figured it was just someone trying to mess with me. A jealous client. A competitor. Nothing serious. He looked back at me, his expression grim. But if they're watching you too, this is bigger than I thought. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you tell me? He scoffed. Oh right. Like you would have believed me? You'd have accused me of playing games. Just like you always do. His words stung, but I didn't deny it. He was right. I would have accused him. I had spent weeks convincing myself that Jake was just a pawn in my game, a toy to manipulate, a past to haunt. But now I wasn't so sure. The fear was real. And it was suffocating. My phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. Jake crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing it before I could. His face hardened as he read the message. Unknown number, you always did like playing with fire, Claire. But you forgot, fire spread. My chest tightened. What does that mean? Jake's jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the phone. I don't know. He turned to me, his eyes piercing. Pack a bag. You're staying somewhere safe tonight. I blinked. What? Where? With me. I opened my mouth to argue, but the look on his face stopped me cold. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Fine, I muttered, heading to the bedroom. But I'm only doing this because I don't feel safe here. Yeah, Jake muttered, his eyes flicking to the window again. That makes 2 of us. Jake drove in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror. I didn't ask where we were going. I didn't want to know. We pulled up to a small, unassuming house on the edge of the city, tucked away behind a line of tall trees. It was dark, the windows empty, the front porch bare. I hesitated. What is this place? An investment property, Jake said, his voice low. No one knows about it. No one but me. He looked at me, his gaze intense. And now you. I swallowed, my throat dry. Why? Why would you bring me here? Because they won't find you here. The certainty in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. He unlocked the door, guiding me inside, locking it behind us. The house was sparsely furnished, just the basics, a couch, a table, a bed. It felt cold, sterile, like no one had ever really lived here. Jake moved through the house, checking the locks, drawing the curtains, his movements quick and precise. I watched him, a knot tightening in my chest. He was scared. And if Jake Sullivan was scared, we were in serious trouble. He turned to me, his expression softening. You should get some sleep. I'll keep watch. I wanted to argue, to ask 1,000 questions, but my body was heavy, my mind exhausted. I was too tired to fight him. Too tired to fight anything. I curled up on the couch, pulling the blanket around me, my eyes drifting shut. But sleep didn't come easily. Every creak, every whisper of the wind sent my heart racing. Somewhere out there, someone was watching me. Someone who knew me. Someone who hated me. I woke up to pounding on the door. My eyes flew open, my heart leaping into my throat. I bolted upright, my head spinning as the knocking grew louder, more insistent. Jake was already at the window, his body tense, his face pale. Stay back, he ordered, his voice low. I barely had time to react before the door flew open, crashing against the wall. I screamed, stumbling back as 2 men burst inside, their faces hard, their eyes cold. Jake lunged forward, his fists swinging, but they were ready. One of them caught him by the shoulders, slamming him against the wall, pinning him there. The other turned to me, his mouth curling into a cruel smile. Hello, Claire. I felt the blood drain from my face. Who are you? He laughed, his eyes gleaming. You really don't recognize me? He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. I'm hurt. I backed away, my hands shaking. I don't understand, eh? His expression darkened. No, you wouldn't. You never paid attention. You never cared about the people you hurt. My head spun. Hurt? I don't even know you. His eyes blazed with fury. No. But you knew my brother. I went still. Your brother. His lips twisted. Matthew Pierce. You ruined his life. You destroyed him. And you never even looked back. My stomach dropped. Pierce, you mean? Natalie's. He sneered. Natalie's ex-husband. The one you cheated with. The one who lost everything because of you. His voice shook with rage. You wrecked his marriage. You took everything from him. And when he couldn't take it anymore, when he ended his life, you didn't even come to the funeral. The room spun around me. I didn't. I didn't know. You didn't care, he snapped. But you're going to care now. I backed away, my heart pounding. I'm sorry. I didn't. But his eyes were cold, unforgiving. Sorry doesn't bring him back. He turned to his partner, jerking his head. Take her. We'll make her suffer like he did. I screamed as they grabbed me, my body fighting against them, my vision blurring with panic. Jake lunged forward, breaking free, his voice desperate. Don't you touch her. But they were too strong. Too fast. I was dragged out into the night, my screams echoing through the trees. And as the darkness swallowed me, I finally understood. I was the villain of this story. And now the past had come to collect its debt. The end.